Stop judging yourself for what you are not doing in your health and fitness, and let's start using the scale and tracking as tools to fuel your growth instead. Hi, I'm Sarah Beth Martz. I'm a personal trainer and health coach. I personally lost 70 pounds before my first pregnancy and then a combined 35 between my two postpartum periods just by learning how to build consistency first. And now I help other women to do the same thing. So I want to talk to you today about how to use the scale and the tracker as instead of using them as sources of shame, which is what a lot of us tend to do, and turn them instead into powerful tools that actually help you see progress. So we will learn how to look at these numbers as data points, as information, instead of as judgment against yourself, so that you can get out of that cycle of shame that we tend to get ourselves in and start seeing real results. So we're going to talk about the problem and why we tend to get into this loop of judging ourselves. We're going to talk about the important mindset shift that can get us out of it. We're going to walk through my method for tracking to actually help you to turn that into data points. And then I'm going to talk also about how to incorporate the scale into that, because the scale can very easily be something that is one of our biggest sources of judgment if we don't use it carefully. So let's dive in. I personally have been using the tracker for 5.5 years now, ever since I first started my weight loss journey. And I say first started, but I should say that with a little bit of caution there, because I really first started, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe, trying to lose weight. And I spent years bouncing around from different methods and counting calories and counting macros and like trying all these different things. And I kept giving up on myself. But it's because nothing was sustainable and everything made me feel like crap about myself whenever I ultimately couldn't stick with it. I would just feel crappy about myself. And it became something where that aspect of tracking, of writing down the things that I was eating, just felt like this weight. It felt like it's just pointing out all of these things that I'm not doing well. And then the scale would just kind of feel like it's mocking me a lot of the time. And I would end up, just not going on it regularly, because to be honest, it kind of sucked. But once I figured out how to use the tracker, use the scale as tools instead of methods of judgment for myself, that's when I really started to see some real change. And so I was talking about this in my membership community, the Fitness Story Society, last week, because I was sharing my tracker breakdowns every day. I shared with them here's my tracker, here's what I ate, here's what I wrote down, and here's what I gleaned from it. And in that practice of doing that, I had a conversation with one of my members about, she was saying how that was really impactful to be able to see that, because for her it can tend to be like a triggering thing, and that's something that she's kind of working through. And I thought that just really resonated with me, because I knew like that's how I used to see it as well. And I know that that's a very common thing, that she's not the only one that experiences that. So I decided to make this YouTube video about that, because I feel like it's a really important topic. And from my perspective, whenever I look at the tracker and the scale now, they are really important pieces to accountability, to having that self accountability is what I like to call it. Some of us might refer to it as self discipline, but I don't like that phrase. I prefer just having an awareness and an accountability with myself, more than a discipline where I'm standing over myself, kind of beating myself up if I don't stick with the thing, if that makes sense. So that really helped me see how we could talk about this in a really productive way. So that's what we're going to do today. So starting out talking about the problem. So many of us tend to default to this self-judgment, to this looking at the scale and feeling like at least for me, I would look at the scale and just feel like crap about myself, feel like it's just evidence of all of the things I'm doing wrong, all of the ways that I'm not showing up for myself, that I'm not following through on what I said I was going to do or whatever. And it kind of would feel like it's mocking me. It would feel like something I didn't really have control over. I would stand on it and look at that number and determine, okay, I'm going to change that. I'm going to do something different this time. And then get on it a week, a month, however long later, and it would just have gone up again. And then it felt so out of control. There is a Brene Brown quote, which I love, that says, shame corrodes our ability to believe, no, shame corrodes our belief that we are capable of change. And I love that quote, because if it's so true. When we are holding shame against ourselves, when we are like judging ourselves for the way that we're showing up, for the things that we're doing, then we're not looking at what we're doing as something that we're even able to change. We're beating ourselves up. We are comparing that to who we are. We're saying that those actions are who we are, and we believe that we aren't capable of changing them. And so shame keeps us stuck. Judging ourselves, looking at a tracker, looking at the scale, and feeling like crap about us, that keeps us stuck. So we have to shift our mindset in order to be able to move forward, to take action, and to see progress on our goals. So that's why we need the mindset shift. The mindset shift is all about moving from this place of judgment, looking at the tracker, looking at the scale, and seeing what we're doing wrong, to seeing it as just information. It's data. It is helping us, giving us something to learn from, something that is going to help us to move forward. It is so, so important to be able to be aware of the choices that we're making, because if we're not aware of them, we can't really change anything. Because I don't know about you, I've had this experience many times myself where I maybe have gotten on the scale and been like, why did the scale go up? I had a really great day yesterday. And then when I really sit down and think about it, or if I've been tracking, I look back at my tracker and I'm like, oh, okay, that's why. Because without that intentionality and that just extra awareness to our choices, so many things can just kind of like fly under the radar. And then we feel like what we're doing just isn't working. And it's true, it's not, but it's not because the method we're following doesn't work. It's because we're not actually really truly following that method. And so we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable to that. We have to be able to have that awareness around what's actually happening, not what we think is happening or what we feel like should be happening, but we need to have that awareness of the choices we're actually making with grace. Because again, like I said, that's where we can fall into that judgment. If we, when we bring that awareness, when we track those things, we can very, very easily turn to it and judge ourselves for the choices that don't line up with where we want to be. So it's this very delicate balance of grace and accountability. And so for me, that comes to looking at those things, looking at those tracking data points, looking at the scale, and looking at them as information, as data, as something that I can learn from, and not connecting it to my identity, to who I am as a person. And that is a very, very delicate balance, but I'm going to walk you through how I track to be able to do that. So whenever I track, first off, I write down as many details as I possibly can. I do not count anything. I don't count calories. I don't count macros. I don't count points or anything like that. I simply write down, what did I eat? I do try to quantify it in some way. A lot of times it's just visual. It's like if it was this frozen, veggie meal, that's what a lot of stuff that I make. A lot of my, especially at lunchtimes, I love just like pulling frozen veggie meals and just throwing them in the microwave. So I might do like I ate half of that, or I ate all of that, or I ate, a fist size of green beans. I keep coming back to vegetables as if that's all I eat. It's not. But I like to have some method like that of quantifying. And it might even be my plate, because I use the same size plate for every meal. So about half of my plate was this. Or whenever I make oatmeal, for example, I measure out that oatmeal so I can say one serving, or I usually do one and a half whenever I make it. So I know for myself that like I'm actually measuring that, and so I can quantify that a little bit more. So I do like to have that specificity with it, but I don't count it in a way that whenever I think of calories, or I think of macros, or I think of those things, it feels like a very fine line where it's easy um, to make that connection to identity, because it's like here's the number of calories I should be eating, here's the number of macros I should be eating, and here's what I actually ate, and therefore there's a disconnect, and that means something about me. It's very easily to go to that place. Whereas if you're just kind of painting a picture, if you're jotting down, here's what I ate, and you're quantifying it so you can picture it on the plate again, like I don't remember exactly how much that was. Let me kind of picture what that looked like on my plate. If you've quantified it so that it's easy to do that, then you have an accurate picture of what you ate, and you're not comparing it to anything else. There's no standard of here's where I'm falling short. It's just awareness. And so that's what I love doing, is just tracking everything that I'm eating, every little thing, even just a bite. I try to remember to track that down. And then I also track everything else. I track the hours of sleep. I track what time I ate my meals, what time I got on the scale, how much water I drank, if I pooped the day before, where I'm at in my cycle, my stress levels, my energy levels, all of those things. And mindset too. I really try to track my mindset and pay attention to that, and then pay attention to any physical symptoms. So I've been having some issues with back pain the last few days. So I'm definitely making a note of that so that I can compare that with my workouts. And then if I had indigestion, or if I had some other physical symptoms that I can tie to what I'm eating. I want to be able to see those patterns that are happening. And so I really like to track as many details as possible, get it all down, and then take a step away from it and go back and reflect. And so what I was doing in the community last week, where I was sharing my tracker and I was reflecting on it, it's actually a little bit deeper than what I typically do on a day-to-day basis, but it was so helpful to be able to reflect in that kind of, like I said, that accountability way without attaching it to identity, being able to take in all of the information, all of the data, and go, what can I learn from this? So the first thing that I like to do is start with celebrating what is currently working. What did I do well? What am I proud of? What is already working that I can build on going into tomorrow? So typically, if we look at our tracker at the end of the day and we are looking at if we're counting calories and we're like, here was my calorie goal, here's where I ended up. It's just this quantitative, either like pass or fail kind of thing, right? But instead, let's look at it, even if you are counting calories or counting something else, look at it from the perspective of not the total number, but how did every single meal, how did every single decision play out throughout the day? And what are the things that went well? What worked for you? And what can you replicate tomorrow and the next day going forward? How can you build on those habits, those choices, those things that really worked for you, where you set yourself up for success? And this may not just be like the specific choices, but maybe you decided that before you went to bed last night, you were going to clean the kitchen and make sure you had a fresh place to start at the beginning of your day. So whenever you walked in this morning, it was so easy to make breakfast, and everything was already out and it was just ready to go, and that just made you feel so much lighter and made you want to cook something for breakfast. It could be like little habits like that. It may not actually be what you're eating itself. So look for those things. What are those things that are currently working for you? And look for those patterns that you can see, especially as you track. If you're not currently tracking, as you begin to track daily, you can see those patterns come up over and over. Then the next thing that we're going to do is not look at, here's what I did wrong, here's where I was bad, here's where I messed up, but instead, what were the obstacles that came up? Not what's wrong with me, just what got in my way, and what are the choices that maybe I'm not as proud of that I would like to do differently. This is where the bulk of our learning can really come from. We can learn a lot from our celebrations and what we can build on, but we can learn even more from what didn't go well, if we are open to that perspective. So we're not looking at it as something to judge ourselves for, but instead we're looking at it with an open mind as an opportunity. What can I learn from this, and what can I tweak? Why did that not go well? And we can't answer that with something that has to do with me. It's not because I'm lazy, because I can't stick with anything, because whatever. But what came up for you? What was the obstacle in the way? Why did that feel hard in that moment? Why did it feel overwhelming? Did you just not have the physical energy? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe it's actually about working on the habit of sleep and not really the habit of specifically what you're eating. Maybe we need to work on sleep first and then lead into the meals. Or maybe it's about meal planning. Maybe you haven't planned anything out for your week. And so when you went grocery shopping, it was kind of haphazard and you didn't really have food to work with that was going to set you up for success. So maybe it's about focusing on that habit first, again, before you focus on the meals themselves. So think about, what can you learn from it? What went well, what didn't, from the perspective of just learning. What is this data? What does this information tell me? And then create action steps to move forward based on that data. So I want to kind of show you how I did this in the community last week. So I shared my tracker, and what I told them was, I like to start by looking at my weight, because this is the outcome. So I guess I'll mention that really quickly here. As far as the scale, how I like to incorporate that, your tracker is showing you all of your input, all of the actions you're taking, all of the choices you're making, all the things that you're doing. The scale just shows results on the other end. And to be clear, there are a million different ways that you can track results. It does not have to be just the scale. But what the scale does is it boils that all down, everything that you did yesterday and the day before and the day before. It's not just a reflection of the last one day, but it takes that and it puts it into one quantitative number. And so it can be so easy to step on the scale, see that number, and just kind of like create all of this meaning for ourselves about what that number actually means. Really, it is one small tiny picture of all of the inputs that you did over the last, like I said, not just yesterday, but previous days and even weeks leading up to today. And so the problem with using the scale on its own is that it's so easy to create meaning from that. It's so easy to judge ourselves from that. And it's only an output. It doesn't actually show what we're putting in. And those are the things that we actually have control over. We don't really have direct control over the outputs. We only have control over the inputs. So that's why I believe so heavily in the scale. That's why it's such an important tool. I mean, the tracker, I'm sorry. That's why I believe so heavily in the tracker, and why the scale only works when paired with it. It's so important that we're not just stepping on the scale, because that's where you get, like I mentioned at the beginning, where I felt like I was just so out of control. Like the scale had control over me. I didn't feel like I had any control over it because I wasn't tracking what I was doing and I wasn't learning from that tracking process. So that is why the scale is an incredibly important tool, but it has to be combined with the tracker in order to be able to learn from it, because it is such a small, minute piece of the overall picture. So what I did here in my community when I broke this down was I said, okay, so here's what I saw on the scale, but here's how I can learn from that. Here's what that's telling me. So a half a pound, not a whole lot, but it is, whenever you consider in the grand scheme of things, it is reasonable to expect up to 1 to 2 pounds per week if you are really truly in weight loss mode. So a half a pound, seemingly overnight, is significant. But I was coming off of a week where I'd had a bunch of treats and I was drinking a lot of water, and so I was kind of hoping it would just flush things out. And so I just wanted to be transparent. And I think it's important to do that with ourselves. You don't have to take, these things that you are breaking down here, your reflections, and share those with anyone. But for yourself, it is important to just be honest about that. I was feeling a little bit disappointed. I was kind of hoping to see a bigger drop, but I didn't, and that's okay. It's still significant. And so I'm fully acknowledging all of the feelings around this, and also trying to think about it from a logical perspective as well. So then I looked at it and I said, okay, what can I celebrate yesterday? I can celebrate not just what I chose for lunch, but I can celebrate that I was super tempted to just quit to fix a quick PB&J for lunch, but I chose this instead. And so it's important to celebrate. I felt like doing this, but I did this anyway, because it shows you overcoming something. You overcame an obstacle in that case, and that's something you majorly need to celebrate. It's also something that you can learn from too. You can say, why was I so tempted to do that? Was it because I was tired? Was it because I didn't have a lot of energy? Was it because I didn't have anything easy, because I hadn't planned out my meals, so I didn't know what to make for lunch? There could be a lot of different reasons that I was tempted to do something that I knew wasn't going to serve me. I know how I feel after a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and it's not great. And so that's not what I wanted for my lunch. And so just kind of, again, looking at that as what can I learn from this can be super helpful. And so I celebrated having veggies at lunch and dinner and sticking with my meal plan, even though I was tired. And that's really huge. And I want to celebrate that above and beyond my water goal. Again, like, let's celebrate that. And I can ask, okay, what was key in that? What helped me to do that? And how can I do that again tomorrow? And then just the fact that I tracked, that in and of itself is something to celebrate. That's a consistency habit, and that is worth looking at. So then, after I've already celebrated, after I've looked at, okay, here's what the scale said, here were the emotions going on around that. Now let's kind of like compare that to the tracking and see what's going on. First things first to celebrate. Now I can pull out what I can learn from that. And so that's where I started to go, okay, if I was really wanting to be hardcore weight loss mode, which right now I'm focusing on some other areas. I'm focusing on my physical fitness, I'm focusing on my strength and my workouts, and I'm focusing on my energy, my mental and physical energy levels apart from weight loss. But if I were really focused on weight loss mode, here's some things I could do differently. I could switch up my breakfast a little bit. I could really dial in what veggies I'm choosing and how I'm fixing them with my lunches and with my dinners and what proportions I'm eating them in. But for right now, I'm just celebrating that I made an intentional choice to include these things. I also made this intentional choice to add more protein at lunch because I was listening to my body and I felt like I needed it. But there's another learning opportunity where I can ask, why did I feel like I needed it? Did I get enough protein at breakfast? Is this something that I need to think about going forward, where I could incorporate more protein earlier on if I feel like, the meals that I planned maybe, or maybe it's about the meals that I planned, that they're not sufficient for me, that I need to incorporate more protein going forward. So just what can I learn from that? What can I do differently? And so I had several of these things that I pulled out that I could learn from, and there could be a myriad of things that you might find in your tracker. But this is the key here, is that it's all about that process. How are you walking through and gleaning things from your tracker and looking at it as information, looking at it as data, and not something to judge yourself for? Because the tracker and the scale don't mean anything about you unless you give them meaning. They are not meant to judge you for your worth. They are simply tools to help you gather information, to celebrate progress, and to make informed decisions about your next step so that you can continue to see progress going forward. So I wanted to share with you really quickly, if that sounds overwhelming to you at all, I have a workshop coming up where I'm going to be talking a lot more about this and really breaking it down and making it super, super tactical. I've been working on the workshop slides, and then this week I started working on it's a workshop about weight loss journaling. So I started working on the journal this week, and I got so excited because it just feels so tactical, and I am so excited for it. So we're going to be diving into um, where you are right now at the beginning of your journey, uncovering the stories that you're telling yourself, taking your excuses and your obstacles that you have, and kind of like flipping them to create a roadmap for you to be able to see results. And I'm really excited about that part. And then we're going to dive deep into how to track, what to track, and how to use that to hold yourself accountable. And the workshop comes with this weight loss journal. So you'll get access to all of this if you decide to join us. The last section is all about taking your wins and turning them into proof by turning them into affirmations, not based on where you want to be, but based on the proof you are already creating of where you are. So I am so, so excited for this. If you're interested in checking out this workshop, it's going to be probably at the end of February. So if you're interested in checking it out, I don't have a page yet for you to opt in specifically for the workout or for the workshop, I mean. But if you will click the link in the description of this video, you can download my guide to uncovering your fitness stories, which is a really great first step to that workshop, to kind of give you some time to begin thinking about that and start reflecting on that before the workshop happens. So you can get that guide delivered to you, and then you will also get the information about the workshop emailed to you once that is kind of firmed up with those dates. So I hope this was helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts. What are the mindset that you are currently struggling with? What thoughts come to your mind whenever you think about the scale, when you think about tracking? And what is something that we can do today to start to flip that, to start to begin to see it as information and as data? I cannot wait to hear from you. We will touch base again soon, and I hope to see you in that workshop. And until then, have a good one.